GZ Truth News. It is December 11th, 2024. We have a very special guest, Dr. Jim Fetzer here. Thank you very much for tuning in. And let's, there's been a lot of news, a lot of interesting stuff going on, trying to get us updated here. Jim, you're always the greatest aggregate for all of that. So it's all yours. Thank you.
Well, I'm very pleased to be joining you once again. I believe the most serious development from the point of view of Americans is Trump's cabinet selections. I was overjoyed, of course, when he defeated Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who would have been disastrous for the United States, recognizing that their election would be a guarantee of calamities, and that with Trump at least, there was a prospect that we might do better, but where it too was not a sure thing. Nevertheless, I, for the third time, voted for Donald Trump, and I was very glad for his election, which appears to have occurred because the Democrats, who had been stealing elections in 2020 and 2022 using a deeply embedded algorithm to find, manufacture, create votes, for the election of Trump here in 2024 revealed unmistakably that the 2020 election had been stolen, because if you go back to 2016 compared to 2020, 22, 2024, you find the Democrats are able to muster around 65 million votes. But then in 2020, it somehow jumped to 81. And that's because they threw in 15 million additional votes in order to guarantee they would defeat Trump, and elected who most people thought was Joe Biden, but is actually a facsimile thereof. As those who have visited my blog and done search on Joe Biden, the real Joe Biden, the actor Joe Biden, are aware, the man who's been in office here for nearly 4 years is not, in fact, a senator from Delaware who appears to have died in 2017, but an actor. Sometimes it appears he's wearing a latex mask. There may have been more than one impersonator, but where if you go back to, say, the real Joe in 2007, 2008, when he speaks, he's extremely articulate. He uses his hands and gestures when he speaks, as do I. His face is very expressive. Whereas the guy that they cast as the imposter is none of the above. He doesn't have an expressive face. He comes across looking more like a cadaver. He never uses his hands and gestures. He's not articulate. He doesn't show the kind of pizzazz that was the real senator's trademark on the stump and made him appealing to lots of voters. I mean, he was always an egregious liar. I think it's one of the most distinctive traits of the real Joe Biden, that he lied all the time. He exaggerated his standing in law school, his background, his accomplishment again and again and again. Even his granddaughter has acknowledged that her grandpa died in around 2017, but the family liked being in politics, so they began faking it. And what we've had has been the Ersatz head of a crime family, the Biden crime family, including most notably his son Hunter as a front man and his brother Jim as a co-conspirator, engaging in forms of extortion, money laundering, influence peddling, where Biden even grossly abused his role as vice president under Barack Obama to threaten Ukraine with withholding $1 billion in foreign aid. You might ask what we're doing giving $1 billion in foreign aid to Ukraine way back when. But he even went on the Council of Foreign Relations. We got it all on video boasting how he threatened to withhold $1 billion in foreign aid if they didn't call off the prosecutor who was looking into Burisma, the Ukrainian gas and oil company where his son Hunter had been given a cushy job that, depending on the payment schedule you hear, may have added up to $1 million a year for sitting on the board of directors of a gas and oil company with no knowledge whatsoever of the energy field, no competence in administration of a corporation, pure influence peddling. And he was boasting about forcing the Ukrainian government to pull off the investigation of Burisma. I mean, this is the quality of the man that was pseudo-elected in 2020. No possible way did he actually win the election. Now, a colleague of mine by the name of Jerry Corsi has had a role in exposing this deeply embedded algorithm and even figures as high up the chain as the Pope have acknowledged that Jerome Corsi had a role here. So this was very significant. Plus, of course, we had Laura Bush on a Trump niece-in-law or daughter-in-law on the Republican National Committee who took measures like having thousands of poll watchers out there, 500 attorneys distributed across the country. So we were able to win a victory. It wasn't unqualified, meaning the Democrats still have sought to steal elections. They did so in Arizona effortlessly, where Kari Lake was denied the opportunity to become a senator after having previously been denied the opportunity to be a governor in spite of overwhelming public support for both. And we're right here in my own state of Wisconsin. A fellow named Eric Hovde was running for the Senate against Tammy Baldwin, lost his race when there was a 108,000 ballot dump in Milwaukee around 4 a.m. in the morning. We all recall in 2020 how they discontinued the vote. Trump was comfortably ahead. It appeared he would coast to a victory. When they resumed voting, there'd been a gigantic jump that resulted from dumping those 15 million additional Biden ballots. Well, in Milwaukee, 95% of the 108,000 did exactly the same, a jump for Tammy Baldwin to steal that election here. And even though I've written to the Wisconsin State Journal, to Judicial Watch, to Larry Klayman, to Reese Priebus, none of them have shown the least interest, even though the evidence is clear-cut. That upsets me quite a lot. Meanwhile, out in California, which is under Gavin Newsom become among the most corrupt states in the union, they've been seeking to steal a couple more House seats to make it more and more difficult for Trump to govern. Well, in spite of that all, I was delighted by Trump's victory and regarded it as a major plus and benefit for the American people. With one exception. I've been very concerned about Trump's, to me, excessive enthusiasm for all things Israeli. And as Chuck Baldwin has pointed out, Trump has appointed what looks like a war cabinet full of Israeli zealots that looks as though it's prepared for war with Iran now. I have been to Iran. 2014, I participated in a New Horizons International Conference. Wonderful event, bringing intellectuals from around the world together in Tehran. I've appeared on press TV many times. Not once was I censored in any way, shape, or form in presenting my opinions about geopolitical developments. Where I've come to recognize Iran is one of the great peace-loving nations of world history. Iran has not launched a war of aggression against any other state since 1775. And to put that into historical perspective, the Constitution was ratified in 1787. George Washington was elected our first president in 1789. So for longer than the United States has existed as a constitutional republic, Iran has not launched a war of aggression against any other state. It has, of course, defended itself against the onslaught from Iraq, which the United States encouraged, where both sides lost about 1 million of their troops, but that was defensive. Now, of late, of course, Israel is attempting to target Iran, and we've had what I regard as nothing short of a calamity with the collapse of the Syrian government. Everyone must bear in mind that it appears to be part and parcel of the greater Israel project, where Israel, citing dubious biblical sources, claims to be entitled to all the lands from the river to the river, from the Tigris Euphrates to the Nile, which includes a chunk of Egypt, most of Saudi Arabia, Syria, even into Iraq, all of Lebanon, all of Jordan. Well, the biggest piece of the puzzle has just fallen now with Syria to a group of self-described jihadists who, in fact, are part of a terrorist army that was created and financed by the United States and Israel. Initially, Al-Qaeda, falsely accused of being responsible for 9/11, when it was an Israeli op with the concurrence and cooperation of the CIA and the neocons in the Department of Defense, where Michael Rupert, in his magisterial book Crossing the Rubicon, based upon publicly available sources, established that on the ground, the events of 9/11 had been directed by Vice President Dick Cheney from a bunker beneath the White House. I have no doubt that is the case. Blamed on Osama bin Laden, but Osama was our man in Afghanistan. He was an officer in the CIA, Colonel Tim Osman. He was actually visited in a hospital in Dubai by an official from the agency shortly before his death from his medical maladies in Afghanistan on 15 December 2001. It's tough to get dialysis machines in and out of those caves in Afghanistan. He was buried in an unmarked grave in accordance with Muslim tradition. By the 26th of December, both CNN and Fox had caught up with the news and reported that Osama bin Laden was dead. Nevertheless, Barack Obama found it expedient to resuscitate him and have him die again in a staged raid on a compound in Pakistan, where none of the local residents reported having ever seen Osama bin Laden. But he did that in order to position himself for a triumphal re-election as the man who got the most wanted man in the world. But it was all propaganda. It was all political theater. And now with the fall of Syria, Israel is that much closer to achieving its Zionist aspiration of the Greater Israel Project. It's not done yet. But this has been a significant development, and in my opinion, it reflects badly, it's harmful to the interests of Russia, to the interests of Iran, and of course to those of the Syrian people, including a Christian community that the democratically elected President Bashar al-Assad had protected consistently. But where this band of jihadists are extremely anti-Christian, we can anticipate all kinds of attacks. Christian churches are going to be demolished. Christians are going to be beheaded. In fact, the guy who's on top of the pyramid made his mark beheading people. Now, some of the beheading videos, by the way, were completely staged on, fake web proof. And the United States was instrumental in creating ISIS. That was a decision made by John Brennan, then director of the CIA, Hillary Clinton, and Secretary of State and Barack Obama as president, which was adamantly opposed by Michael Flynn as director of national intelligence, such that Brennan suggested to Obama that because of his opposition, Flynn ought to be fired, which Obama obligingly did. And of course, as we all know, when Trump was elected in 2016, he made Michael Flynn his national security advisor, which was intolerable to the neocons because he knew where the bodies were buried. So they went after him hammer and tong, just as they have gone after Matt Gaetz, whom Trump appointed to be Attorney General, and he was the perfect guy to do it. Now, in the wake of these developments, I'm very, very troubled that, as Chuck Baldwin has observed, Trump has picked a war cabinet. I have a piece by him on my blog that I recommend everyone should read in detail to understand where we stand right now politically in the United States. Here are a couple of opening paragraphs that I regard as highly insightful. The Trump toadies who are convinced that Donald Trump is going to drain the swamp and make America great again during his upcoming second term as president are delusional. He did neither during his first term, and he will do neither during his second. One need only look at Trump's appointments at the senior executive leadership level will direct his administration to know that Trump is nothing more than more of the same, especially in matters related to foreign policy, which is the one specific area where a president can single-handedly do the most damage. I have already warned readers about Trump's appointments of the uber-Zionist warmongers Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, Kristi Noem as Secretary of Homeland Security, Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor, Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, Elise Stefanik as U.S. Ambassador to the UN, and uber-Christian Zionist Mike Huckabee as U.S. Ambassador to Israel. Now we can add uber-Zionist Sebastian Gorka and Pam Bondi to this ignoble list. Judge Andrew Napolitano said that to a man. Trump senior executive leadership picks are 60% Jewish and 100% Zionist. Trump is being true to his campaign promise to make Israel great again. The Bondi appointment as America's Attorney General is especially noteworthy. Trump's first selection for this position was Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. But after being announced as America's next Attorney General, the Zionist news media and political lobbyists pounce into action. You see, Gates is one of the very few members of Congress who is not on the Israeli lobby payroll. The result? It took only a matter of days for Gates to be forced to withdraw his name from the nomination. Enter Pam Bondi. Bondi is a rabid pro-Zionist zealot. She's also a radical anti-Bill of Rights zealot, especially the First Amendment. Bondi, along with Department of Homeland Security nominee Kristi Noem, has every intention of stomping out freedom of speech in the United States, especially speech that denounces the ongoing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon, who support Palestinian statehood. Now, let me just say, these are very, very troubling developments. I'm afraid, I fear, I'm apprehensive that Chuck Baldwin has it right, that Trump is not actually going to make America great again, but rather Israel, which of course has fallen so far in the eyes of the world. The ongoing Commission of Genocide, which has been supported by the Biden administration by providing the weapons of slaughter, and now it appears will continue to be supported by the Trump administration, is grotesque, absolutely grotesque. The world's condemned it. The International Court of Justice has reviewed the legal right to the existence of Israel and found it to be wanting. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, and Gallant, his Secretary of Defense, for war crimes, for crimes against humanity, for violating the Geneva Conventions, the United Nations Charter, international law. These people are monsters. And the very idea that the President of the United States should be supporting them causes me great dismay. If I look at the situation and other appointments he's made, including this excellent choice to be our border czar, I do believe he's serious about securing the border. I do believe he's serious about mass deportation. I do believe he's serious about getting men out of women's sports. I do believe he's serious about making crime illegal again. I do believe he's serious about eradicating the woke agenda. I do believe he's serious about eliminating diversity, equity, inclusion policies from the American government. I do believe he's serious about cutting the size of the bureaucracy. I believe the appointment of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy for this new Department of Government Efficiency was a brilliant stroke, which I support 100%. But when it comes to foreign policy, the situation is completely different. He has proclaimed he would end the war in Ukraine virtually overnight. And yet you got this Sebastian Gorka, who's a raving lunatic, as a spokesman declaring that Vladimir Putin is a murderous former KGB colonel and asserting that if Russia doesn't come to the negotiating table, then they're going to arm Ukraine in a way that'll make past support look like peanuts. Give me a break. The U.S. and NATO have been going all in for Ukraine. Ukraine has lost. The war is over. All the words and threats from Sebastian Gorka aren't going to affect Russia one whit. And when you recognize Russia as the most formidable military power in the world today, with the new Oreshnik hypersonic missile, which delivers 36 warheads with exact precision, it's simply a height of irresponsibility to have a spokesman for the incoming president make declarations of this sort. So I'm terribly, terribly concerned what's going to happen here. Also, Trump has similarly issued a warning to Hamas, threatening that if Hamas doesn't give up the hostages, and it may have as many as 100, before his inauguration on the 20th of January, that he's going to hit them harder than any have ever been hit in the long and storied history of the United States, which is a stupefying claim, because after all, the long and storied history of the United States includes Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So what is Trump proposing? He's going to nuke Hamas? Well, with great dignity and utter professionalism, Hamas suggested Trump ought to redirect his ire at the Prime Minister of Israel, because it is he, as other Israeli experts and commentators have observed, who has thwarted ceasefire proposals that have been put on the books and, in fact, rejected them categorically. The plan is to level Gaza, annex the West Bank. Sad to say, Sheldon Adelson, the billionaire out of Las Vegas making his money in casinos, gave Trump $100 million with a proposition that he should declare the Golan Heights to be Israeli territory and move the American embassy to Jerusalem. Trump took the money and did both. And now, although Sheldon has departed from the scene, his widow, Miriam Adelson, reportedly has given Trump $250 million to annex the West Bank to Israel. And I believe that's going to come to pass as well. So while I celebrated the election of Trump, we could not have the continuing disaster represented by Kamala Harris and the Democrats, where she has never received in the past, had never received a single vote for president of the United States, and where she showed no ability or talent whatsoever on the campaign trail. A number of her appearances appeared to be when she was intoxicated, actually drunk, and where she blew through over $2 billion in a matter of weeks with nothing to show for it. Even James Carville has declared this is a disaster for the Democrats, because what donor is going to support a party again with large-scale financing, which has been expended so irresponsibly? She was giving out money by the bushel basket for celebrities to endorse her. Reportedly, $20 million to Beyonce for a 3-minute endorsement that did not even include a performance. So the situation has been catastrophic. We couldn't have the continuation of the Democrats and the ongoing flooding of the border. What this means, thus, and we get this too from Chuck Baldwin, what I think we're going to see happen, an agenda spelled out in the Heritage Foundation Project Esther, which is actually written by Christian right activists, Christian Zionists, is to seek terrorism designations for groups like Students for Justice in Palestine, American Muslims for Palestine, groups leading the demonstrations in the street, and then begin to actually prosecute them and debank their activists, going to places like PayPal, Venmo, ordering them basically to block transactions of anyone who's leading Palestinian solidarity activity. I mean, this is all spelled out. And Bondi seemed to be the perfect person to advance the authoritarian, anti-freedom, un-American agenda. on behalf of Netanyahu and the Israeli apartheid regime. Thus, Napolitano says to Max Blumenthal, who happens to be Jewish, but he's an expert, balanced, highly intelligent commentator, showing no bias toward Israel whatsoever. Napolitano. Is there anybody in Trump's cabinet that's not an ardent Zionist? Blumenthal. I mean, yeah, it's Miga. Make Israel great again. Thus, I submit for every action, especially in terms of foreign policy made by this new Trump administration, ask yourself the question, is this going to benefit the American people in the interests of America? Or is it, in fact, going to promote the interests of Israel and making Israel great again?
Well, thank you very much, Jim. That's lots of updates, lots of developments. It's pretty interesting stuff. Hopefully, hopefully all these wars settle down so nothing too crazy goes down. But I think with the money printing, they keep printing money, and I feel like that's the direction they're heading.
Yes, I'm sorry to say I couldn't be more optimistic. So I'm afraid this is what we're getting, and we have to be very clear-eyed about it and speak out in opposition. Hold his feet to the fire to the extent to which we're capable. Meanwhile, I can only hope that Russia and Iran and China, too, find a way of dealing with a political international behemoth, the United States and Israel, which have become the most despised and reviled countries in the world for their violations of international law and supporting an ongoing genocide and then condemning anyone who speaks out against it, in which there could be nothing more appropriate, especially by these young students whom I greatly admire, who are now acting at the risk of their futures, their reputation, even their standing as college students. This is a pathetic situation for the United States, but that's where things stand today. Sad to say.
Tough times towards the end of the year here, but hopefully 2025, let's hope for the best. Expect the worst, hope for the best, but let's get things, end the wars and, stop the money printing, and hopefully 2025 will be great in that regard.
Devoutly to be wished.
Yep. Well, all right, Jim. Well, thank you very much. Till next time.
My great pleasure.
And hopefully better news next time. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.